Yeah, so here's what happens. People don't know I'm trying to run a motherfucking podcast, and then meetings get scheduled. I do have a day job. Unfortunately, the $60 a month, me and Charlie split that two ways. $60 a month we make on this show. It doesn't quite cover the bills. It will soon. So I do have a day job. If you're interested in building software, come to your boy. So these meetings get scheduled. I'm West Coast time right now, so the meetings get scheduled at if I get a meeting at 7 a.m., it's like, 10 a.m. Eastern. It's like, damn, that's 7. So that means on Wednesdays I gotta start recording at 6. So right before the meeting, rip a pod and then go live. So that's why we're a little earlier today. It's fine. There's only a few of the homies that stream live. Most of you get on the podcast, which is chill. But it's kind of a fun situation we got going on. So I just get up ass early when people say, "Oh, does 10 a.m. work for everyone?" Everyone's like, "Does 10 a.m. work?" I'm like, yeah. What do I say? I got a podcast. Yeah, I could say that, but okay. Well, let's rip it, baby. Okay, so here's what we're gonna be talking about. We're gonna be riffing on a culture war exhaustion. I've been talking a lot about culture war stuff. I think I'm gonna take a little pause from that here. But we're gonna talk about Bitcoin and gold. Thank you, Matt Buckley of nicethings.io. Inspiring that. He's got some good questions in the Patreon group as well. William Barr calling Apple a China pawn. I've been calling them for that for about 2 years now. Twitter, the Twitter hack and Coinbase stopping transfers. Ethereum settling more value per day than Bitcoin. Auger V2, which we've talked a lot about. The fracturing of the internet into U.S., China, EU, and India lines. The internet failing so far to live up to its mission of routing around censorship. Signal in Hong Kong. A New York Stock Exchange company settling a bond fund on Ethereum. Deaths are rising again in the United States. COVID. And Mr. Money Mustache on lifestyle versus COVID. We're going to talk about the USDC blacklist. Financial Action Task Force on addressing stable coins. Jesse Walden and the ownership economy, and GPT-3 of OpenAI if we got time, which we never do. So we're just going to be blitzing through some of these things. We got a lot of different topics today. Last time it was only 2 and kind of just really dove deep. So last week we were talking about Barry Weiss. New York Times, she had a resignation letter, which I thought the letter was cool. I don't really know much about Barry Weiss. I've seen her in a couple interviews. I don't know if I'm totally sold on her in terms of her ideas, rather. But she had some interesting points. Anyway, we riffed a lot on that. And I'm kind of getting exhausted. I go down these rabbit holes on Twitter. I talk about following people on the left and the right, and I've talked about how people on the extreme left and the extreme right, and kind of I think it makes you think that people care about things that most people don't. It gives you a skewed perception of reality. Following the extreme, especially like fucking Trader Jose's, they're having to change that. I just saw that come up on the timeline. I'm like, I can't fight this. What am I gonna? I don't want to learn more about. I don't need to know what Trader Joe's is doing with that. There's just all these things that are constantly coming up where people go to war on both sides. They go to war screaming at each other about things that I think most people don't care about, and in the grand scheme of things, don't matter. So I'm going to kind of tone it back on this stuff a little bit. I started unfollowing some people that were just total culture war heavy. It's funny because people on the left, a lot of people just get offended by everything on the left, and the people on the right just get offended by them being offended. So it's like, okay, well, you're crying because they're crying, so you're both crying. So let's everyone just take a step back. And it's funny because you spend this is partly why I have, honestly, with this podcast, I put a lot of time into it. And it's partly why I'm just thinking I'm a really big fan of people that are actually doing things in this. When I say doing things, I mean building something. Whether that's a business, a Fuka new technology, whether they're in their community actually doing something and helping people. Big fan of that stuff. And I look at myself when I'm doing this podcast. Granted, it's a small percentage of my time. Or I look at just anyone who's just kind of a culture critic or someone who's talking about people doing things. I'm like, sometimes you can do a little too much stocky. I think if people spend a little bit more time actually trying to, take action on certain things that they wrote about and felt strongly about, we'd have a better world. Now, granted, we do need to talk about things, right? We absolutely need journalists. We absolutely need to be able to riff on these things. We need to, but sometimes we go overboard, and I think we have. it's just like, okay, let's, a fucking ounce of action's worth a pound of talk. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with that. So I'm gonna kind of take a break from from that stuff. I think because frankly, we talk about thinking in decades here. A lot of that stuff that people get offended by, or people get offended by people getting offended by, it's not gonna matter in 10 years. They are interesting conversations to have. I think they're fun on some level, but it does get exhausting because things that don't really matter. In terms of, in these extreme debates that most people don't care about, and most people aren't going to have their daily lives affected by it. So I think it's almost a game engaging in these things. For those that engage in it and those that read about it, it's like, okay, so I'm gonna take a little break from that stuff. But it's all good. We'll probably be back to it because there are fun discussions to have, but we can overdo it. Okay, let's riff. Okay. Buckley, you're my boy. He sent me price of gold has recently shot up. It's about where it was. It peaked, I think, a few months ago when the Fed was buying a lot of government bonds, and i.e. printing money, allow our government to create U.S. dollars essentially. And the gold kind of came out, but I don't know if I said this. I actually bought a little bit of gold. Just a little bit. I forgot I think it's I don't know. I just bought like a fund that, not actual gold, but I bought a fund that tracks it, whatever. Not a large percentage of my, of my net worth, if you will, just a small amount, but I just did it kind of for the, just to, kind of for fun. Buckley, Fukin sent me these charts, and I didn't even know that kind of gold was rallying. And this happens a lot. Gold goes up, gold goes down, it goes up when people, for a variety of reasons, right? We don't always know the reasons, but generally people think it's secure. You can't print more gold. You can print more U.S. dollars. So people buying gold is essentially a hedge that the U.S. dollar is going to drop a lot in value. I.e. inflation, and then your assets will be protected in gold. Rather, your value will be protected in gold. It's interesting. So far, we haven't seen inflation. We didn't see massive inflation. We didn't see inflation after 08, 09, those bailout packages. What's funny is we didn't see inflation, but education, healthcare, and housing costs have all fucking skyrocketed. So people say, oh, there's no inflation, but why do some of the three most fundamental things cost so fucking much? And I don't know enough about inflation and stuff. That's just me riffing on it. But here's what's interesting. People go to gold. The value of gold is more than its intrinsic worth, right? It is a metal that you can do special things with. It has certain properties that are actually, that are actually valuable. It doesn't oxidize. It doesn't oxidize. I think one of them you can do in certain electronics. You can do things with it. The value of it though is far higher than its utility worth. So why is the value so much higher than it's actually worth, right? Than the value it actually gives you in making things. People view it as a store of value. People assume that when they buy it, someone else will buy it back from them at a later date for either the same amount or greater, or at least close to. Whereas fiat currency, which is fiat currency, is I think it means government backed. It does mean government backed currency. Inflation happens all the time. The government can always print more. The earth isn't going to print more gold. You can always mine more, right? But that's not as much of a. We can trust Mother Nature a little bit more than we can trust the people with at the printing press. And let me be clear about what the U.S. was doing with the way the Fed reacted to the stimulus. I think generally the consensus, who knows what's going to happen? This is a lot of what we talked about with Howard Marks, who was sharing his opinions on this. We just don't know what's going to happen. We're in an experiment. We've never spent this much We've never printed this much money. Who knows what's going to happen? We're in it. So anyone saying anything right now, it's a little too soon. But generally, people I trust and people, Warren Buffett said this. The Fed did some things, and generally, I think the consensus is that they needed to do those things. And I talked about my concerns with some of these things. And anyone who's not concerned at least a little bit, we've never done anything like this before, so you should at least be concerned because it's an unknowable situation. So I think generally they need to do something. Warren Buffett said in his shareholder meeting, his 4-hour fucking thing, which was epic. I recommend everyone go watch that. We covered it on the podcast. But he said the cost of them not doing anything is far outweighs whatever cost or repercussions of them actually doing something. And it's pretty crazy. We shut down the economy. It's still pretty much shut down, or a lot of sectors rather. And we didn't just go into some crazy deep depression and everything just gets nuked, which is pretty unbelievable when we think about it. And also it shows the resiliency, how powerful the internet is, that so much of work, can still happen remotely, which is truly epic. And also I want to relate this the gold back to Bitcoin. So I think so many people don't realize about Bitcoin. Just take a step back. In the Patreon community, which you can contribute to the show on Patreon, and we also have a little community in Buckley. It's pretty much the only one that says anything in there, which I will always love him. I will always have his back for that reason, and I appreciate it. He said, what are people using Bitcoin for in 10 years? Are they using it for anything, or is it just something like gold, i.e. an asset class for speculators that don't really have a practical use? I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment. Bitcoin's build itself hasn't changed much. Satoshi Nakamoto, the pseudo-anonymous person or persons that developed Bitcoin, released it open source, and now it's just taken on a life of its own. It hasn't strayed too far from that vision. If you actually read the Bitcoin white paper, which I recommend you do, it's only 9 pages. Just Google Bitcoin white paper. It's super epic. There's some math shit in there that I don't understand, but if you want to know more about cryptocurrency, start with the Bitcoin white paper, because a lot of the fundamental stuff that a lot of other cryptocurrencies have replicated, it all comes from there. Just read the source material, people. It's not, we've been trained to think that, the source material is for smart people, and we need to read someone describing the source. No, just read the source material. And if it's too complicated, okay, then take a step back and get a review on it. But what people don't understand about Bitcoin, I think, is if you liken it to gold, right? Why is gold valuable? Well, it's valuable because we think it's valuable. Well, why? What is one of the reasons we think it's valuable? Well, we think it's valuable because there's not going to be a bunch of it dumped on the market that's going to drop the value of it, right? The more of something, the price goes down, right? And why do we know there's not going to be more gold dumped on the market? Well, we pretty much have an idea of how much gold there is on Earth, and we can mine more, and we are mining more, but it's not as if some government's just going to dump more. Okay. Boom. So keep that in your head of why gold is worth far more than its intrinsic value, the value that we actually get from using it in goods and electronics, things like that. And Warren Buffett famously said, if aliens were looking down on Earth and saw people scoop up gold and then put it in a vault, they were just to put it in a vault, they were wondering, well, what the fuck are they doing? It makes no sense. I should also say quickly that also stocks are a hedge against, if you're worried about inflation, you don't just put all your money in gold. You really the way to protect against that's stocks, right? Put in the stock market, because that's not you're buying a piece of a company. It's no longer your value's not stored in U.S. dollars. It's company denominated now. So that's another thing. I think inflation really hurts those that have a large percentage of their savings in cash, for example, which unfortunately hurts. It's going to hurt poor people, especially people that don't engage in the stock market. It's funny. I talk to people. Oh no, the stock market's too risky. I talk to these people, and they're shaken from 08, 09, and I think there's. It's the single best easiest way to build wealth. Full stop. No question. Even better than real estate for sure. Just in terms of the likelihood that it's going to go up, and how easy it is to then sell. It's just if you're going to get a house, don't do it for an investment. I think. I mean, you can if you're, a real estate developer, but don't do it casually. Just save yourself the trouble, invest in the stock market. If you buy a house, but buy it to live and not as an investment. But yeah, Bitcoin has similar properties to gold, right? What can you do with Bitcoin? Well, what can you do with gold? Not much, but it's still super valuable because people perceive it as value. Similar with Bitcoin, except Bitcoin, mathematically, we can verify that there won't be any more dumped on the market. What's to say a gold asteroid's not going to fly by Earth? We're going to harvest the metal, bring it on, boom, gold price. There's not more Bitcoin floating out there. You know what I mean? There's not like another Bitcoin chain floating out there that we can. There's not a deposit of it that we can perceivably mine. So in terms of what I think Bitcoin's going to be in 10 years, I think it's still going to be around 10 years. I think it's going to be super important. I don't think people are going to be transacting with it. I think, as you say, it's going to be more of a store of value type of thing. And part of that is there's just not the community around it. It's not and this is a good thing. I mean, it's a feature. It's a feature of it. They're not experimenting a lot with it. They're not trying to make transactions super fast. They're not trying to, because a transaction, the block time's 10 minutes. So it takes 10 minutes before you can see a transaction happen before that. Like you can see a transaction get broadcast to the network, but it won't be mined for 10 minutes. And then you really want to wait, depending on how secure you want it to be, 3, 4, 5 blocks before the transaction's gone through. That's 50 minutes, right? So I think I really do. I think it's still going to be around. I think it's still going to be important. I think it's going to be store value. I think most people aren't going to care about it, or rather use it on a daily basis. Or if they are using it, they don't know they're using it. I saw a tweet here. I don't think I copied it in here. It was pretty epic. This guy said, crypto will win when it becomes boring, when people don't know they're using it or they don't care that they're using it. Right now, crypto's like, oh, I'm using crypto, strap into your motherfucking seats, and that's how I am when I'm using it. It's like I know I'm using it. I'm using it intentionally. Let's do this. Do you do that with email? Do you do that with Twitter? Do you do that with you browsing the internet? Do you do that with any of these technologies that are fundamental, society altering, civilization altering? No, you just use them because that means it's been successful. I forgot who said that on Twitter, but that's how we'll know it's successful, when it's just boring and we just do it and we don't talk about it. So I think a lot of that will be, I think a lot of cryptocurrency use will be, you don't even know you're using cryptocurrency. Like I always think about this, like imagine a bank could conceivably, like, you send money, everyone's done a bank transfer. I'm not talking about Venmo, but an actual bank-to-bank transfer. It takes a couple days, takes a few days. Don't even get me started with international. International is a scam. They fleece you on fees. It's a joke. God bless TransferWise, but no, that's not cutting it, especially with people that are sending money back home and they're trying to make money with remittances, send back to their family. They get nuked on fees. It's a nightmare. It's a total scam, full stop. No one can defend it. It's an international banking system that is just not working. I shouldn't say it's not working. It could be working a hell of a lot better, and that's why I'm glad there's things like cryptocurrency coming along. But damn, I forgot the tangent I was on. I'll be straight up. Yeah, Bitcoin. Shit, man, I forgot. But yeah, we'll know. Oh yeah, I think of a bank that is just like when I send, if I send money to your bank account, you're on Wells Fargo, on Bank of America, let's say. I send you money and then it instantly shows up in your account. What if the settlement layer was USDC, a stable-backed coin, US dollar stable-backed coin, which we'll talk about, but you just see that it's US dollars in your account, but it shows up within a few minutes. Boom, it's there, you can spend it. So what if the settlement layer, and you don't even know you're using cryptocurrency? So I think there's going to be, has potential to be some stuff like that. We'll see. I'm super excited about this stuff. I'm gonna keep talking about it because I think it's one of the most interesting things. And a few of the people I follow in tech, Benedict Evans, Ben Thompson, great. If you want to learn about tech, follow those guys. They have great newsletters. Both of them, they both have paid options now. I'm a huge fan. I pay for their premium tiers. That's like $100 a year. It's nothing, and the knowledge you get is they're so good. They're like my idols. The way they talk about tech and cut through it, and I really respect the work they do. But you want to learn, but they don't talk about cryptocurrency. I'm like, God, they talk about it a little bit. It's like, bro, talk about it more. I wish they talked about it more. Okay. William Barr, whatever you think about him, recently called out some U.S. companies, Apple, for one. He talked about, which we've been talking about. I've been tweeting about this for 3 years, people. I've been talking about this. I've been tweeting about it, talking about it on the show, and no one gives a shit. But William Barr, and I made a prediction, no grading prediction, that Apple will be called to account at some point by the U.S. government. Now, I don't consider this being called to account. William Barr is just, they're not, Tim Cook's not having to testify or anything. But William Barr said he was calling Apple a pawn to the Chinese government, and in many ways that's absolutely true. The iCloud data is owned. Apple iCloud data is owned by the Chinese government, full stop. If you're doing business in China, you're giving them all your data, full stop. Apple does a lot of good stuff with privacy. I think they deserve a lot of credit, but they also deserve to be called out when they're not living up to the things they say they live up to. And China's a big market. It's the biggest market for them. They're trying to make money. I get it. Is it better that they are there than not? Probably. I don't know, but we gotta call balls and strikes here. We gotta call it like we see it. Okay. Twitter hack. There's a Twitter hack that probably, I think this was last week. Someone got access to basically the God mode. So basically, Twitter employees, they have access to people's accounts. They can do things. In this case, they can reset. They can change email addresses associated with accounts. And someone got a Twitter employee apparently sold access to this, or a Twitter contractor. I don't know exactly which, but they sold access. So it's not as if Twitter was hacked. Like, oh, they got into the database and they got into their servers. It wasn't like a technical hack. It was a they're going to get access to an employee's access, which makes me feel a little bit better. You think about it, these big tech companies have a pretty good track record with security. And Twitter, remember when Donald Trump's Twitter account was closed for several hours? That was a contractor for Twitter, not even a Twitter employee. A contractor for Twitter had access to shut down the president of the United States, a democratically elected president. I think the guy's an asshat. I think he pisses on American values. But a democratically elected president, he's still the president of the United States. Democratically elected president, a contractor was fucking able to shut his account down. So then Twitter said that, okay, now accounts like Donald Trump require a higher level of access. They're not just going to give it to contractor. Boom. Okay, I get that. That makes sense. But now they had all these so basically what happened was all these verified users on Twitter, many of them, their email addresses were changed. So that's how hackers were able to get access to their accounts, and they were able to tweet out. They tweeted out a scam. They tweeted out a Bitcoin address and said, Biden, I think Obama did tweeted, whatever, Elon Musk, send Bitcoin to this address and we'll send you back double. It's something like, we want to help the community. And they only got like $200,000 worth of Bitcoin. They had access to all the most influential people in the world. And all they got was $200,000, which is pretty hilarious. Some people were like, "Oh, they should do stock stuff. They should have manipulated the stock market and done all this shit." First of all, if you manipulate the stock market, that's all traceable, right? Like you can see who is, the SEC would be so far up your ass you wouldn't know what to do with it. They would be able, they could track, okay, who traded who traded on this information, and who is making trades that look like they'd be guilty. With Bitcoin, you can't, you can see the transactions that are being made. That's why we know how much money this person made. But then you don't know who it is. You just know that someone with this wallet address, boom, has this money now. So that was kind of interesting. Twitter, this is a big fucking deal. They've already had this happen. It's embarrassing. Twitter's kind of getting a lot. And then they started to lead hack. Oh my God, dude, Twitter. Listen, I think it's a cool platform, but that is Twitter. Get your shit together, dude. That is ridiculous. Okay, but also it was interesting because Coinbase, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, which is I think probably the most trusted cryptocurrency exchange. Some people were up in arms, and it's a fair point. People on Coinbase were trying to send money to this scam address, and Coinbase stopped them. And the whole point of cryptocurrency is, you can't stop people. Well, when you have money, when you have crypto on Coinbase, first of all, Coinbase should have done this. They should stop people if their users are getting scammed. They said they stopped about $300K worth of transfers being sent to this address. They stopped those transfers, which is epic. Good for them. They should do that. But people are arguing, crypto, the whole point of crypto is you can spend it, no one can censor it. Yes, but when you're cryptocurrency, the famous thing in cryptocurrency, a saying, it's not your keys, not your wallet. If you have money on Coinbase, if you have crypto on Coinbase, Coinbase is a custodian of that crypto. They control what you can do with it. If you actually want control, you can send it to a wallet that you have the keys to. Other than that, they can do whatever they want, and they're beholden to U.S. regulations. They're beholden to not just U.S. regulations, regulations in the countries that they're doing business in. But people are getting pissed at Coinbase for doing this, and I think it's absolutely good that they were doing this. But it's an interesting thing. Again, if your crypto's on an exchange, you can't fucking it's not really yours. Now, I'm not saying keep all your money in your own crypto, or keep all your crypto in your own crypto wallet, because that has its own problems. If you die or if you lose the keys, it's all gone. If you die and no one knows the keys, boom, no one's inheriting that. It's gone. So it just brings up an interesting thing. Okay, here's another thing. Talk about Bitcoin as a store of value. Ethereum is currently, so both cryptocurrencies, well, Bitcoin's settling about $2 billion a day. So there's $2 billion worth of transactions on Bitcoin per day, which is a lot. That's pretty epic for an open source tool that was launched from a pseudo-anonymous group. Like, this is insane. Like, people say, oh, Bitcoin's a scam, Bitcoin, $2 billion a day. This is science fiction. It's already won. It's no longer a debate of, is cryptocurrency going to be meaningful? It's already meaningful, and people are already transacting with it, and it's already changed the world, full stop. The question is, how much will it change the world, and how much will it seep into our everyday lives? Early on, the internet was we're just starting to see the ramifications of how internet's changing shit. We're just scratching the surface. We're just realizing you can work from home, and things can kind of keep going on. Cable is still now just finally fucking dying in terms of subscribership. But Ethereum, so Bitcoin settling $2 billion a day, Ethereum settling $2.5 billion. 2.5 billion, and this is mostly the rise of stable coins, which is why Bitcoin, Bitcoin's is great for Bitcoin's got a good history of, there's only be 21 million of it minted. There's about 18.5 or 18.9 minted now. But Ethereum, in terms of what we're going to be transacting with, in terms of where the things are being built today and where all the cool shit's happening, it's Ethereum. That's the playground. That's the sandbox right now, and it's absolutely insane. But we need, people. It's so funny because people are religious about everything. They're religious about their beliefs on everything. There's communities of people like, oh, Bitcoin's the only way, and Ethereum's the only way, and Bitcoin's trash, this is that. Well, what if they both do things differently and they both serve a certain purpose? And I feel like I always sound like such a softo when I say, well, what if they're both right? Like, can't we all just get along? Leave Britney Spears alone. Listen, I do feel soft when I say that, but the reality is it's not true. It's not always true. But in this case, it is true. Bitcoin and Ethereum do different things. We're not going to take that into politics. Republicans and Democrats, people that think the left is right about everything and think the government can solve everything. You're psycho, and people on the right that think we just need to starve the beast, and we don't want to work on making a well-functioning government. We just want to. We think that if we don't have one and people are left to their own devices, and we don't have a kind of a checking mechanism to kind of keep everyone from killing each other. I mean, come on, guys. Let's. There's sides to both. So it's just funny to watch the fucking absolute flame war on, and I try not to follow people on Twitter that talk like that. I've tweeted at them a few times, and it's just like you try to engage with him, and you just get, it's funny. People just light you up. Especially the Bitcoin maximalists is what they're called. It's a pretty hilarious community. But anyway, they do different things. Ethereum's far more interesting right now, and that's actually a good thing. I don't want, if Bitcoin's a store of value, it's supposed to be boring. I don't want it to be interesting. I don't want all this change to be happening. It has a good run of 10 years. Let's keep it going for another 50, 100, and let's keep it going. 6:30. We're not even a quarter of the way done here. I love it. I love that we can just keep. Damn, I always think I need to prepare more for this. Okay. Auger V2, we've talked about this. It's going to launch July 28th. This is a potential thing, and we'll see. This could be a big moment for cryptocurrency in terms of what's going to take it to that next group of people. What's going to be that iPhone moment? People talk about the iPhone moment of mobile. Smartphones were a thing before the iPhone. People had them. Microsoft was leading that, Microsoft, Nokia, whatever. There were, Nokia had an app store. You could like download apps and shit. But then the iPhone moment was what took it from a kind of a niche sub $500 million to I forgot what percent, but like 4.5 billion smartphones on Earth out of like 8 billion people, something like that. It's crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, Auger V2 could be that. What is Auger? It's a prediction market. What's a prediction market? It allows you to bet on the outcomes of events, sports, politics, the price of financial assets. You can bet on anything. How does it work? Well, you have a rep token. So how do you know how these events turned out? Well, you have a rep token, and whoever has the rep token gets to stake how certain events turned out, and they get rewarded for staking that. So if you're a member if you're a rep token holder and want to collect fees, you just stake on events. You say, oh, Donald Trump won in 2016. You stake those. So it's a super interesting way. There are prediction markets, there are prediction markets now. You can like predict it, and there's other things you could bet on politics. They're illegal in the I think they're illegal in the United States. Like you can't bet on politics in the United States. I don't exactly know, but this is decentralized. It can't be shut down. And it's built on Ethereum. It's super, super, super interesting. So I have a lot of friends that bet on sports, and the janky ass websites they use, it's unbelievable. First of all, I'm heating up in here. Let me just give me a second. Take the jacket off. Jacket off. Okay. Yeah, my homie's bet on a lot of sports, and this is why I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Like, I'm waiting to like present this to them, because it's going to be a way. So Auger's been around for a while, just so we're clear. There is a V1, but it's clunky and it's slow. But Auger V2, here's what bets are now dollar denominated. Trading is cheaper and faster. The trading interface is robust and makes sense to use. You don't need to acquire Ether to trade. You can store your funds with a username and password. Payouts are significantly faster. Markets should not be plagued with validity issues or tricky wording. Okay, so it's a hell of a lot better than V1, and I played with V1. I played a little bit with it, but it's a pain in the ass to use. V2 is going to be super, super interesting. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out, because there's this guy who worked at BitTorrent in the early days, and he talked about what his whole premise. He had these epic posts. I think they were Medium posts or LinkedIn posts. I think they were Medium posts. But his whole premise was, what rules are you breaking? Torrenting like was breaking laws. Like that was breaking laws, and that's why it had to have this decentralized nature. If you're doing something on the blockchain, his whole thing was it's pointless. If you're not breaking, what laws are you breaking? If you're not breaking laws, then why are you worried with putting it on a blockchain? It's just a pain in the ass. It doesn't really buy you much. It's kind of an interesting point, because Auger V2 is certainly it's illegal in the United States. I mean, you can't bet. There's a lot of these things you can't just bet on sports, right? In every state, I think a few states you can, but this is the internet. This is the vision of the internet that doesn't include borders. It's going to be super, super, super interesting, and I'm very excited. Launch it July 20th. I'm going to play with it, and then I'm going to tell my friends. I'm going to see what they think of it. I'm going to be like, yo, if you bet on stuff, although there's no fucking sports going on right now. There's some, but yeah, it's unfortunate. But there are, I'll be able to bet on political outcomes and stuff like that. But I'm super, super excited for it. I think it's an excellent, excellent project. I think it's one of those things that could be huge. If you're interested, check out Auger, AUGUR. I think it's one of, and we've been talking about on the show for a while, I think it's going to be one of the things that people actually use. People are like, oh, why do I need cryptocurrency? Well, this is one of those things that you could, it's better than the alternative, and it's lower fees. So a lot of these prediction markets where you bet on things, they fleece you on fees to transfer money out. They fleece you on fees. They collect, when you bet on something, they'll just take betting on the outcome of events. It's absolutely fascinating. And they have a master plan part 2. They just released a blog post, and they had their original master plan. They have a master plan part 2, which is create beautiful, easy-to-use mobile-first interfaces, create open-source tools that make it easier for liquidity to form, bring the offline social betting experience online through comments and chat. Now that we've built a core platform that people can use, focus on growth and user activation, build an open-source betting view for Auger so it's accessible to bettors in addition to traders. So that's their kind of next vision. It'll probably take them a few years before they can do all that stuff. But V2 is going to be a huge milestone. I'm very excited, and we'll see what happens. Okay, speaking of fractured internet, and I want to quote John Gilmore from 1993. He was an activist. He said the net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. So this is the early days of the internet when it was like it was fucking hackers and academics, and it was like, yo, we're gonna build it. We're gonna connect everyone on Earth, and it's gonna be borders need not apply. It was all just there was no notion of it was the internet. It was the World Wide Web. It was one World Wide Web, and there weren't this notion of borders on the internet is like it doesn't make any sense. At least it didn't. But it's sad because the net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. We've seen that has not panned out. That's not true. 27 years later, we've actually seen that it can be used as a complete surveillance and censorship tool. Look at what China's doing. Look at the NSA in the United States. And now I'm not equating it to China's on a whole nother level, brother beast. But I am saying that well, he's talking about specifically about censorship. But no, you can censor things. You can censor things in China. Full stop. There's tools that are being used right now to censor the internet. It's not as if the internet was just some boom blanket free for all wild west. Wild west. It didn't pan out that way. Now, granted, there are VPNs and stuff you can use for people in China that want to get around this stuff. And I've talked to Chinese citizens. They say, no, I just use a VPN when I want to access stuff. It's not a big deal. And so maybe in some regards, John Gilmore is right, but for a ton of people that aren't going to waste their time with VPN or not going to get exposed to certain information, it's like, damn, that's a hell of a thing. So Ben Thompson had a great piece talking about the Indian internet, the U.S. internet, China internet, and EU internet. You say, well, what does that make sense? Isn't it everyone's connected? Well, China struck first with their firewall with blocking a Western outside internet services. No major tech companies operating in the United States besides Apple, pretty much. I think actually Microsoft Windows is used there, but it's not. I don't know to what extent. I know Google had a plan to put some servers there. They were like, it ain't worth it. Although Google gets. Google gets dogged on for, they read all your data. They're not doing business with China. Apple is. So check yourself on that. But what's interesting is we are seeing the internet break up into pieces. The EU just this privacy shield thing. They basically passed some legislation that says data of European citizens can't go to U.S. data centers. Because obviously with the Snowden leaks, we know that the U.S. whatever they can get their hands on, they're gonna try to do shit with it. So the EU's starting to do that, which means that these services are going to be more expensive. As Ben Thompson points out, it's going to be harder. It's going to be easier for big tech companies can spin up a regulatory, and they got lawyers out the ass. They can easily spin up servers in different geographies and manage that. The incumbents love regulation. That's what people need to understand. Regulation is a double-edged sword. You got to be careful it doesn't further entrench the big top guys, which is what this is going to do. India is also banned a bunch of Chinese apps, which I'm pretty sure they went through with. I'm pretty sure. I haven't followed up on that honestly, but we're starting to see, and India did this because China-India relations. There's some border disputes there, which is actually pretty. There's a border dispute, and they don't have guns. The people, military on both sides patrolling the area because they don't want to turn into something bad. Which I kind of good for China and India. So what these soldiers are killing each other by throwing each other off cliffs and punching each other and like throwing rocks at each other, shit like that. So which is pretty insane. But Ben Thompson also talks about how the U.S. regulatory environment for is one of the reasons that internet companies have absolutely flourished in the United States. And one of the things is their lax treatment of user data. The U.S. doesn't really. U.S. is pretty loose on regulating companies, and what happens when you're not going to regulate these companies to do certain things? Well, they're going to be able to spend more time on building actually good products instead of worrying about following every single little law needing lawyers to read through things and spending time on that versus actually building product for users. So he says that's one of the. It does have its trade-offs. He mentioned because user data isn't as it's not as protected, right? But he talked about GDPR, which has just been an absolute failure. It doesn't actually protect users' data. It makes it harder for startups to do business in Europe. It makes it harder for new incumbents. It makes it easier for incumbents to keep their market share. What's funny is the EU. Oh, look at all this data protection stuff. There's no EU tech company. Spotify is the biggest EU tech company. Spotify, music streaming. They don't have big tech companies. China does. The United States does. Where are the EU tech? I wish there were more EU tech companies. They're just not. And you really got to ask yourself, well, why is that? Is the regulatory environment? It's got to be partly that. Certainly, there's more restrictions. It's going to make it harder to build there. Is there other reasons? Maybe, I don't know. But you got to at least ask yourself. And I've tweeted Benedict Evans. He didn't really answer my question. He responded, but then didn't answer. I'm like, dude. But another thing about the internet, Clinton in the early days was talking about how, we need to do let's do business with China and we'll kind of liberalize them that way. We'll export our rock and roll, our movies, our technology, and it'll just be a liberalizing factor. And he was wrong about that. He was wrong. It hasn't turned out that way. And he thought, especially with the internet opening things up, bada bing, bada boom. No. China hasn't opened up shit. They've been more closed off. So it's absolutely interesting. If you asked me 20 years ago, is China going to be worse, in terms of their censorship and in terms of what they block, in terms of the IP theft they steal from other countries, in terms of allowing other countries to come in and do business with them, it's a total train wreck. So it's interesting how that worked out because China has not liberalized at all. In fact, they now have Xi Jinping is now a dictator. He can't be voted out. He's for life. He's a thug. Also speaking of which, they had this. There's that law, that Hong Kong law, or basically the U.S. It's funny. This is what's hilarious. Yeah, Twitter allows Chinese propaganda accounts, and I don't think they should get rid of them, but it's just funny where they draw the line. Chinese propaganda accounts just tweeting falsities and shit like that. But they have one that described this new law. I forgot what it's called. It basically allows China, anyone that is sowing discontent in Hong Kong, anywhere in the world, can be arrested. And they had like this little propaganda video of like this kind of cute little girl explaining. She's like, "Yay!" And she's just like, it was like some dystopian shit. She was just explaining. There's all these little cuts and kind of different. It was like something out of 19. It freaked me out. But basically, if you're sowing discontent in Hong Kong, or you're a seditionist, or you're saying the Hong Kong people have the right to freedom, and they should fight for that freedom. Like I've been saying on this podcast, China can arrest you for doing that. I'm curious how this goes out, because they basically said, it's not too different, right, from, I'm not going to act like this is they can arrest anyone anywhere in the world. Well, it's called extradition. Many countries have this. The United States, for one, we can arrest people if they're breaking U.S. laws, even if they're not in the U.S. We have extradition with a bunch of countries, and we can get them. So it's like, it's not as if, this is some crazy groundbreaking thing, but it's pretty broad based. They're just like, listen, if you're gonna sow discontent in Hong Kong, and they did say if you're sowing violence, and it's like, where does that line go? Like I'm saying the Hong Kong people should protest and they should fight for freedom. Absolutely, they should claw with their fingernails for it, or they should just move, full stop. I would move in a heartbeat. I know that's easy for me to say. I don't got a whole family and all these kids and all this family. I would do everything in my power to move everyone I could out of that place. I would not be cool with that. So it's epic with seeing the Hong Kong people fight for this, and I totally support them. So China, we'll see what you got. I only get like 30 views on this podcast though, so y'all don't care. I'm pretty sure my website's not blocked in China, which I was pissed about. But that's all good. Okay. So there's this tweet by, I believe it was Sam Altman. He said this: "The internet is disastrous for large-scale cohesion and amazing for small-scale community." I always thought that was a good trade, but now I don't. Kevin Kelly, I believe is his name, has an article called 1,000 True Fans, and it's absolutely amazing because it's basically, it's the bull case for the internet. It's why the internet is so powerful. Back in the day, unless your hobby or unless the things you were talking about, unless the things you were doing had appeal to millions of people, mass media, unless that appealed to millions of people, you weren't going to get traction. You couldn't get traction. You weren't going to get on a cable news. You weren't going to have your own news station. Or you weren't going to have your own TV show, and it had to be broad-based appeal. What does the internet do? The internet makes it so that everyone is connected on planet Earth, and if there's only 1,000 people out of 7 billion, out of 8 billion, 1,000 people that all want to talk about the same thing, they can have a community. Never in the history of the world has that been possible. If 1,000 people, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, were all interested in something and they wanted to talk about it, boom, you can't. There's no easy way to do that. Now the internet has grouped all these small communities. Look at the shows Netflix is doing. Netflix is making a ton of different shows for all these different small. And this is actually a bad example because Netflix is just a centralized source. But the point holds, and that is that you can unite. Like put it this way. Part of his post is like 1,000. You need 1,000 true fans. If you have 1,000 people across the world, and they're all they pay you $100 a year. That's $100,000 a year. You can get a living. You can make a living off of 1,000 people enjoying what you're doing, enjoying what you're saying. Which is an insane thing. And I think about that with the show a lot. You don't need that many people. So anyway, back to this tweet. So the internet is disastrous for large scale cohesion and amazing for small scale community. I always thought it was a good trade, but now I don't. I think there's some truth to that. I mean, back in the day, Paul Graham has this epic post about how we all used to watch. There were 3 cable news networks, and we all used to watch the same TV shows. We all used to kind of do the same thing. We would all work for the same big fucking companies, and it was all bada bing, bada boom. And we were a lot more, in the 50s, 60s. We were more well, at least on the surface, we were more cohesive. Said Vietnam, the Vietnam War in the 60s. So it's like that was absolutely blitzkrieg. In terms of cohesion, but Sam Altman's saying, I used to think it was worth it, now I don't. So I'm always interested when people say things like this, because the question is not whether you think that the small scale is worth the large scale. The only question is the internet as a whole worth it? And if the answer is yes, then okay, then it's a pointless discussion to have, because if the internet is worth it, then it doesn't matter if certain parts are better, certain parts are worse. If the whole thing is worth it, and I absolutely think it is. And this credit to Ben Thompson, a lot of people dog social media. They say it's ruined, that's ruined society, blah, blah, blah. All these nice hot takes. Yeah, God. Anyway, if you tell me you hate social media. Okay, you think it's tearing people apart. Okay, I get that. Then tell me how it was that the George Floyd video was made public. Well, the original video was on Facebook. And before social media, individual users could not publish videos like that. It just didn't happen. The news wasn't going to cover it. And now with smartphones and everyone's got a camera now and a publishing platform, everyone has a camera, everyone has a publishing platform. That recipe, it's gonna bring a lot of ugly stuff up, but at least the stuff is getting up. Okay, at least the stuff is getting up. Before it wasn't getting up. All this shit was happening. The George Floyds of the world were getting killed. We weren't seeing it. They were getting murdered. We didn't know about it. Now we do. So I think people say, for people to say social media is tearing us apart. Okay, well, what about everything's a trade-off, right? So, well, tell me now that everyone has a publishing platform and can say yes, fake news, but also real news. Tell me how you come to terms with that, because the George Floyd video wouldn't have been released without social media and a lot of things. Look at Weinstein. People. Years ago, Weinstein, and again, credit to Ben Thompson on this. You read him before you read me. But he said this. He said Weinstein was a big advertiser in the New York Times, and they got this story that the guy was the guy was sexually assaulting women, and they dropped it. So tell me when these centralized news, oh, we can trust them. Okay, can we? On some level, listen. I'll be the first to say, what's his name? Denzel Washington said, if you read the news, you're misinformed. If you don't, you're uninformed. I was like, okay, dude, like there's still I just think it's a defeatist attitude. Anyway, whatever. I don't know. It's just a hilarious thing. But you just need to see both sides, because we don't just need now gatekeepers of information. That's what we had before, and it didn't work out. And all this shit that's coming out now, and all this shit that's making you feel like, oh no, society's doomed. Well, guess what? All this shit was happening before. It was far worse. We didn't know about it. So if you want to go back to the old world, just shove your head in the sand, and you'll be comfortable again. It's good to see this stuff come out. It is good to see it come out, because if it's not coming out, you know it's happening. If it's not coming out, then what does that tell you? Okay, it's 6:51. We got through one of these pages. 6:52. One more thing I do want to cover. Damn, there's some other good stuff here, but one more thing I do want to cover is we are starting to see COVIDtracking.com. It's by The Atlantic. It's, I think, the single best source. They compile all the state data, hospitalizations, positive diagnosis, and deaths, and those are the main ones. And number of tests that states are doing. So it's really, 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 really good. COVIDtracking.com. It's by The Atlantic. They don't make up the data. They compile it all from the states, put it in a nice, pretty format. What we're seeing is everyone was wondering, what was that big question of the cases are going up, but the death rate's not. Or rather, the amount of deaths is not going up. We've seen the last few days, it's starting its ascent. It's starting its comeback. I think yesterday 1,000 people died. So it's starting its comeback. So this is what's going to be super, super interesting. And I was talking to this about a friend, and he said, yeah, but what about the death rate? What about the rate of deaths? And my thing with that is, listen, even if the rate is low, if we don't do anything to stop it, if every single American gets it, 330 million, something like that, and the death rate is like a little less than 1%, that's still 1.5 million deaths. You know, if it's 0.5%, it's 1.5 million deaths. That's a lot of fucking deaths. So why don't we stop spreading it, stop giving it to people? Even if the death rate's low, it's still in absolute terms, we're fucking killing people. So let's do that, and let's hunker down. And there's some very interesting stuff. It looks like Oxford University, God bless them, is leading the vaccine race right now. It's looking like that based on some tests they've done. So that's going to be super, super interesting. So and then even once we have the vaccine, assuming it's working, 100%, we're going to need to build output for it, and that's what Bill Gates was doing, building 4 factories for different vaccines. Some of those factories, 3 of those factories might be just a total waste, but we got to build manufacturing capabilities, because having it is one thing, distributing it and producing it is a whole nother ball game. It's going to take, it's probably going to take 18 months or something like that, a long time before we can distribute this to everyone, before it has a meaningful impact on it'll have a meaningful impact right away. I think, healthcare workers are going to get it first, and so on and so forth, the most at risk. And that's going to be interesting how that gets doled out. That'll be very interesting. But we're starting to see these deaths rise, and it's strap in, people. The fight's not over. The fight is not over. Okay, there's a lot of stuff I didn't cover. This was good. This was epic. You know what we do here. You can stop listening if you don't want to hear the outro. I like to get right into it. I hate long intros, bro. I hate it. I just listened to the other podcast. They told me 5 minutes before, not 5, I don't know, 3 or 4, whatever. I'm exaggerating, but it was like, no one cares about your podcast. Like, in terms of me, like, no one cares what I'm doing. Like, it's like, no one cares. I'm Dick Lucas, and I do this show. I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to stop wasting your time so you can get on with your day. But now I'm doing the outro. We'll talk a little about what we do here. Okay, we do this once a week, under 60 minutes. We just talk about the things that I think are interesting. That's pretty much it. I think that's kind of what I'm settling on, because anything more than that is me having to be beholden to something and me feeling like I have to talk about something when I don't want to. It's just things I think are interesting. It's a good exercise for me to talk about. I think it's fun. If you want to join in, that's fun too. That's epic. You can get this wherever podcasts are available. Just search No Gradient. Also available on YouTube. That's where we stream live. Right now it's every Wednesday. Today it was at 6 a.m. Pacific. Most of the time it's at 7 a.m. But I had that goddamn meeting. Oh no. Yeah, which I got to get to. I got to get to that meeting in 5 minutes. Yeah, that's how we do it. We just riff on things. We have fun with it. We mostly about tech, cryptocurrency, politics, things that are interesting, things that I think are interesting. That's pretty much what it boils down to. Gonna be moving to Venice, California, so we're gonna have a nice little studio set up there. Hopefully on the balcony. I think we can have some fun with that. Right now at the folks' place, my dad's lifting over there like a beast. Okay, thank you everyone. This was fun. This was a good riff. Good shit. Stay woke. Let me know what you think. If you want me to cover certain, I'm not going to cover things I'm not interested in. But if you want to give me If you want to give me information, say I'm wrong about something, or give me, dick@nogradient.com. No one emails me, bro. Email me, bro. Email me. I want to hear from you. I hear from some of the homies. It's epic. It seriously makes my day when I hear from one person. It's epic. Makes it all worth it. But I'm having a grand old time with this. Okay, No Gradient. You know the drill. Your boy Dick Lucas. This has been epic. And now we sign off, and it's been super, super beast and super chill. Stay strong.